trouble in your house. It is this, the detours have a strange way of entering our lives. They do not announce themselves with warning signs or flashing lights. They arrive quietly, politely, sometimes even beautifully disguised. They feel harmless, reasonable, justifiable. And that is precisely why they are so dangerous, because the wrong path rarely looks wrong at first. It often looks like relief, like comfort, like something you've heard, a small break, a minor shift, a harmless pause. And you tell yourself this won't change anything. You convince yourself that stepping slightly off course carries no real consequence. After all, it's only temporary, only a moment, only once. But life has a law many people learn too late. Small deviations never stay small. A degree of misalignment today becomes miles of distance tomorrow, not because you made a dramatic mistake, but because you made a subtle one. Because you allowed something insignificant to steal something invaluable. Your direction, think about it. No one wakes up with the intention of losing their way. No one sets out saying, today I will drift from my purpose. No, it happens gradually, almost invisibly. Trouble in your house, it is one distraction, one delay, one rationalization at a time. You skip a day, you lower a standard, you postpone a decision in your house. It is, you accept good enough. And each step feels so minor, so inconsequential that you barely notice the shift. But over time, those tiny choices accumulate, they compound, they reshape the trajectory of your life without ever demanding your attention. The bad is the illusion of detours. They rarely appear destructive. They appear reasonable. The world is filled with invitations to wander, endless alternatives, endless diversions, endless voices urging you to look elsewhere. Try something easier, chase something shinier. And never one of those options seems harmless because none of them look like failure. They look like possibilities, but not every possibility deserves your energy. Not every open door leads somewhere meaningful. Hey, not every opportunity aligns with your path. Distraction by its very nature does not need to overpower you. It only needs to redirect you slightly, just enough to dilute your focus. Just enough to interrupt your momentum, just enough to separate you from the consistency required for growth. And here is the part that demands brutal honesty. Detours often feel good. Comfort feels good. Avoidance feels good. Delayance feels good. Delay feels good. Delay feels good. Bombardment feels good. Delay feels good. Delay feels good. Delay feels. There is immediate relief in stepping away from difficulty. There is temporary satisfaction in choosing ease over effort. But what feels good in the moment can quietly sabotage what you want most in the long run. Ease is seductive. Comfort is persuasive. Convenience is convincing, yet growth has never lived there. Every meaningful achievement, every transformation, every breakthrough has demanded sustained direction, not bursts of enthusiasm, not occasional effort, but unwavering alignment with the chosen course. You cannot wander your way into greatness. You cannot drift your way into purpose. You cannot stumble accidentally into a life of impact. Direction requires protection. It requires vigilance. It requires the awareness to recognize when something, even something attractive, is pulling you away from what truly matters. A toll. They are internal fear, doubt, fatigue. The quiet voice suggesting you slow down, settle, compromise, wait for a better time. These two are deviations. These two can reroute a destiny if left unchallenged. So the question becomes unavoidable. What has been quietly diverting your focus? What has been fragmenting your focus? In your house, it is what has been slowly, subtly pulling you away from your highest intentions. Not the dramatic disruptions, not the obvious obstacle, but the small, recurring, seemingly harmless shifts. Because those are the ones that reshape lives. Those are the ones that create the painful distance between who you are and who you could have become. Awareness is power. The moment you see a detour for what it is, you reclaim control. The moment you recognize distraction, you weaken its influence. The moment you decide, firmly and deliberately to return to your path, momentum begins rebuilding itself. And that decision is always available right here, right now. If you felt the slow pull of distraction, the subtle drift of misalignment, then pause for a moment and reflect. Not on what you intend to do someday, but on what you will correct today. But on what you will correct today. Devil in your house. It is as the direction is a powerful thing. It gives life structure, meaning, and momentum. But direction alone is never enough. Knowing where you want to go does not guarantee you will get there. Intention is fragile. Desire is inconsistent. The clarity, no matter how strong, can dissolve the moment life applies pressure, because direction is not sustained by excitement. It is sustained by discipline. And discipline is a very different force. The discipline does not depend on how you feel when you wake up. It does not consult your mood, your comfort, or your level of motivation. Discipline operates with a quiet authority that says this gets done regardless. It is steady when emotions fluctuate. It is firm when enthusiasm fades. It remains standing when inspiration sits down. Many people wait for motivation. They wait to feel ready, to feel energized, to feel inspired. But feelings are unpredictable companions. Some days they lift you, other days they abandon you without warning. If your progress relies on emotion, your consistency will always be at risk. Discipline, however, asks for no such permission. It shows up on the days you feel unstoppable and on the days you feel uncertain. It moves when you are confident and when you are full of doubt. It does not argue. It does not negotiate. It does not negotiate. It simply continues. That is why discipline is so rare and so powerful. It demands that you act even when comfort calls you elsewhere. It requires that you maintain standards when excuses feel convincing. It insists that you keep moving when stopping feels justified. Discipline is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is the quiet decision made repeatedly long after the initial excitement has disappeared. Make no mistake, excitement always disappears. The thrill of a new goal fades. The energy of a fresh start settles. The emotional surge that once carried you begins to weaken. This is not failure. It is human nature. What separates those who advance from those who stall is not who stays motivated longest, but who remains disciplined when motivation inevitably declines. Because progress built on emotion is temporary. Progress built on discipline is durable. Discipline transforms action into habit. Habit transforms effort into identity. And identity determines destiny. When disciplined behavior becomes part of who you are, resistance loses much of its power. You no longer debate whether to act. Action becomes your default state. Yet discipline is often misunderstood. People imagine it as harsh, rigid, punishing. In the truth, discipline is liberation. It frees you from the tyranny of fluctuating feelings. The most trouble in your house, it is the removes the daily negotiation with hesitation. It eliminates the exhausting question of should I, and replaces it with the decisive statement of I will. Discipline simplifies life. It reduces internal conflict. It creates momentum that does not collapse under emotional turbulence. But developing discipline requires something uncomfortable: personal authority. The willingness to give yourself commands and obey them, the courage to establish standards and honor them, the maturity to understand that long-term rewards are built on short-term consistency. No audience is required, no applause is guaranteed. Discipline is often invisible. The repeated practice no one praises, the quiet persistence that receives no immediate recognition. Yet these unseen actions are precisely what build visible success. What looks like natural talent from the outside is frequently the result of relentless discipline repetition. Now consider your own path. What have you been postponing until you feel like it? Where have you allowed mood to dictate action? Where has inconsistency replaced commitment? These are not minor questions. They cut to the core of progress because every time discipline yields to emotion, direction weakens. Every time standards yield to comfort, momentum slows. Every time action yields to hesitation, distance grows. But discipline can be strengthened. The most trouble in your house, it is the like a muscle, it grows through use. Each act of follow through reinforces it. Each refusal to surrender to distraction expands it. Each moment you choose commitment over convenience increases your control over your own trajectory. It begins with a simple but profound decision. Feelings will no longer determine movement, not because feelings are irrelevant, but because they are unreliable leaders. If this truth strikes something within you, do not let it pass as mere reflection. Pause and examine the patterns shaping your days. Identify one area where discipline has been compromised, one standard that is quietly lowered, one commitment that is weakened. Excuses is clever. They rarely sound like weakness. They rarely announce themselves as barriers. Instead, they arrive dressed in logic, wrapped in reason, delivered with a tone that feels almost protective. They whisper explanations that soothe the ego while quietly sabotaging progress, and that is why they are so powerful. It is an excuse does not argue against your goal. It simply delays them. It does not deny your potential. It merely suggests that now is not the right time. It does not attack your discipline. It gently negotiates with it. And before you realize it, delay becomes habit, hesitation becomes identity, and stagnation becomes comfort. The mind is extraordinarily skilled at self-justification. I'm too tired today. I'll stop when things calm down. I work better under pressure. This isn't the right moment. I work better under pressure. This isn't the right moment. I will do it tomorrow. Each statement feels harmless, reasonable, then responsible. Yet beneath these innocent sounding thoughts lies a subtle surrender of authority, a quiet decision to allow circumstances, moods, and temper discomforts to dictate directions. They provide immediate relief at the cost of long-term progress. They preserve the image of effort without requiring the reality of it. They allow you to feel justified while remaining unchanged. And over time, this pattern becomes dangerously convincing because it feels safe. But safety and progress rarely travel together. Every meaningful transformation demands confrontation with resistance, with the inconvenience, with the persistent urge to remain where you are. Excuses offer an escape from that confrontation. They create a narrative where inaction feels rational rather than restrictive. Yet consider the hidden cost. Every excuse reinforces a limitation. Every justification strengthens delay. Every rationalization builds a subtle belief that your commitments are conditional, that your effort is negotiable, that your direction can be postponed without consequence. But life records every decision. It compounds every delay, but magnifies every delay. It magnifies every repeated compromise. Excuses may feel temporary, but their effects accumulate. Days become weeks. The weeks become years. And one day, the distance between intention and reality becomes impossible to ignore, not because you lacked ability, but because you surrendered repeatedly to reasons that felt acceptable in the moment. Excuses are rarely about capability. They're about comfort. They're about avoiding the tension between where you are and where you must go. They are about preserving ease at the expense of progress. And perhaps most dangerously, they are about shifting responsibility away from the one place it must always remain, yourself. The moment you replace excuses with the moment you replace excuses with responsibility, your sense of control expands, energy returns, clarity sharpens, momentum rebuilds, because responsibility does not weaken you, it empowers you. Because responsibility does not weaken you, it empowers you. It transforms obstacles into challenges rather than barriers. It transforms delay into decision. Ownership says this is mine to solve. Ownership says my progress is not waiting for perfect conditions. Ownership says action will not be postponed by discomfort. This shift is not abstract or philosophical. It is intensely practical. It reveals itself in daily choices, in small decisions that quietly reshape identity. Each time you act, despite inconvenience, you weaken the habit of excuse making. Each time you follow through despite resistance, you strengthen self-authority. Excuses lose power the moment they are recognized. They thrive in unconsciousness. They thrive in unconsciousness. They depend on invisibility. They rely on your willingness to accept them without scrutiny. But when you begin questioning them, when you pause and ask, is this truly a barrier or merely discomfort? Their influence begins to erode. Now pause for a moment, not casually, not passively, but honestly, what explanations have you been repeating? What delays have you been justifying? But what patterns have you accepted as reasonable that may in truth be restrictive? This is not about guilt or criticism. It is about awareness, because awareness is the beginning of authority, and authority is the beginning of change. Progress does not require perfection. It requires honesty. It requires the courage to recognize when the obstacle is not external but internal, when the barrier is not circumstance but narrative, when the barrier is not circumstance but narrative. When the limitation is not reality but rationalization. If this reflection stirs something within you, do not let it dissolve into thought alone. By one excuse that has been quietly shaping your behavior, one justification that has been quietly shaping your behavior, one justification that has delayed necessary action, one narrative that has preserved comfort at the cost of movement. Persistence is a misunderstood force. Many people imagine it as mild effort, dramatic struggle, visible intensity, but true persistence is often far quieter, far less glamorous, and far more demanding than that. It is not about bursts of energy. It is about refusal to stop, not speed, not perfection. The most trouble in your house, it is not constant inspiration, just continuation. Life has a way of testing resolve with relentless consistency. Obstacles do not appear once and disappear forever. Resistance does not knock politely and leave when ignored. Depth. Difficulty revisits, delays reappear, progress slows. And in those moments, the mind begins its familiar negotiation. Maybe this is not working, maybe I should wait, maybe this is a sign to quit. But persistence does something extraordinary. It denies those suggestions authority. Ostensive bands on this truth that impatience often forgets. Meaningful outcomes rarely arrive on comfortable timelines. Growth is gradual, mastery is slow, momentum is uneven. The distance between effort and visible results can be longer than expected, sometimes painfully so. And that gap is where many abandon their path. Not because they lack ability, but because they misinterpret delay as defeat, because they mistake temporary resistance for permanent limitation, because they expect progress to be linear when it is by nature irregular. It sees resistance as part of the process, not evidence against it. It recognizes that friction is not a signal to retreat, but a condition of advancement. Every meaningful pursuit encounters difficulty. Every worthwhile direction demands endure. Every significant goal requires sustained movement through uncertainty. Persistence is not stubbornness without thought, with understanding bit. It is a calm, grounded decision to continue despite discomfort, despite doubt, despite the absence of immediate reward. It is the ability to maintain effort when excitement fades, when recognition is absent, when progress feels invisible. But because often progress is invisible before it is undeniable. In your house, it is consider how many breakthroughs are preceded by long periods of apparent stagnation. How many victories emerge after extended struggle? How many successes are built on foundations of repeated effort that seemed at the time to yield little return? The world frequently celebrates outcomes while overlooking endurance. yet endurance is the architect of outcomes. What appears sudden is usually the result of prolonged persistence. What looks effortless is often supported by unseen repetition. What seems like luck is commonly the reward of those who simply refuse to stop when stopping would have been easier. Persistence is power sustained over time. It does not require dramatic intensity. It requires steady continuation. Small actions repeated consistently outweigh occasional grand efforts. Momentum is built not through sporadic brilliance, but through reliable follow-through. Perhaps most importantly, persistence transforms identity. Each time you continue despite difficulty, you reinforce resilience. Where each time you move despite hesitation, you strengthen resolve. Each time you refuse to surrender to temporary discomfort, you redefine your relationship with challenge. You become someone who does not retreat easily, someone who does not collapse under delay, someone who understands that progress is not measured by the absence of obstacles, but by the refusal to be stopped by them. Now reflect carefully. Where has impatience weakened your persistence? Where have temporary frustrations influenced long-term decisions? They can slow progress for lack of progress, for lack of progress. These questions are not theoretical. They shape trajectories, because the difference between those who achieve and those who achieve and those who achieve and persistence. Time rewards those who remain. Resistance exhausts those who endure. Difficulty filters those who continue. Persistence is not merely about reaching a goal, about becoming the kind of person capable of reaching it. The capacity for endurance developed along the journey becomes as valuable as the destination itself. If this idea resonates, if you recognize moments where persistence hits in your house, it is the as wavered, where patience has thinned, where the temptation to stop has grown persuasive. Pause and examine your current course, not your ultimate vision, but your immediate behavior. What small, consistent action must be maintained? What effort must be continued regardless of fluctuating emotion? What commitment must be honored despite temporary discomfort? Doubt has a voice, calm, persistent, convincing. It does not command, it questions, and its greatest strength lies in how reasonable it sounds when it speaks. Are you sure you can do this? What if this doesn't work? What if you're not ready? What if you fail? These thoughts are familiar to every human being who has ever attempted something meaningful. Doubt is not an anomaly. That is not an anomaly. It is not a defect. It is a natural companion to growth, to risk, to ambition. The presence of doubt does not indicate weakness. It indicates that you are stepping beyond the boundaries of certainty. But here is where many lose their footing. They confuse the presence of doubt with the authority of doubt. They treat thoughts as verdicts, feelings as facts, questions as conclusions. Questions as conclusions. It is to begin surrendering decisions to a voice that was never meant to govern their direction. Doubt is a visitor, not a ruler. The thoughts pass through the mind constantly, some useful, some irrational, some protective, some restrictive, yet not every thought deserves obedience. Not every mental whisper reflects reality. The mind, while powerful, is also deeply influenced by fear, memory, insecurity, and imagination. A thought can feel true without being true, and doubt thrives in that space. It magnifies uncertainty. It exaggerates risk. It predicts outcomes with an air of confidence that has no real foundation. It speaks in possibilities, not certainties, yet its tone can feel so purse that hesitation begins to appear wise rather than limiting. But action reveals what reflection often distorts. Movement challenges assumptions. Movement challenges assumptions, stumbles, exaggerated doubts, because doubt feeds on stillness. It grows louder in inactivity. It expands in the absence of forward motion. The longer you remain paused, the more convincing it becomes. The more you analyze without acting, the more formidable obstacles begin to appear. Action disrupts this cycle. Not because action eliminates doubt entirely, but because it reduces its influence. It shifts focus from imagined outcomes to lived experience. It transforms abstract fear into concrete feedback. It replaces speculation with evidence. Courage is not the absence of doubt. It is the decision to move despite it. Those who advance are not those who never question themselves. The most who advance are not those who never question themselves. They are those who refuse to let questions paralyze them. They understand that uncertainty is not a signal to stop, but a condition of progress. That clarity often follows action rather than preceding it. Waiting for doubt to disappear before acting is a losing strategy because doubt rarely disappears on its own. It fades through confrontation, through movement, through repeated proof that its predictions are not absolute truths. Each step forward becomes evidence against its exaggerated warnings. Each act of persistence becomes a quiet rebuttal to its limiting narratives. Now consider your own internal dialogue. How often have you delayed action because of uncertainty? But how often have you interpreted hesitation as wisdom? Wisdom disguises itself as caution while quietly restricting progress. These are not trivial reflections. They reveal the invisible dynamics shaping decisions, behaviors, trajectories. Because doubt left unexamined can subtly redefine limits. It can convince capable minds to underestimate themselves, disciplined individuals to hesitate, persistent efforts to stall. Yet doubt is not invincible. It weakens when challenged, when observed, when recognized for what it is, a mental event, not a mandate, a suggestion, not a command, a possibility, not a prophecy. Strength lies not in silencing doubt, but in refusing to submit to it. In acknowledging its presence without granting it control. In moving forward with awareness rather than waiting for perfect confidence. If these words resonate, pause for a moment, not to dwell on uncertainty, but to examine it. Identify one area where hesitation has lingered, where doubt has repeatedly influenced choice, where action has been postponed in the name of readiness. Then ask yourself a direct, uncompromising question. Is the barrier truly external or is it internal? The principle in your house, it is that there will be moments on your path when the silence feels heavier than the struggle. Moments when encouragement is scarce, when validation is absent, when the voices that once cheered grow quiet and disappear entirely. And then those moments, something inside you begins to question not the difficulty of the journey, but the loneliness of it. Walking alone tests a different kind of strength. It is one thing to move forward when supported, applauded, understood. It is another thing entirely to continue when no one seems to notice, when no one fully grasps your vision, when the weight of belief rests solely on your shoulders. The beings, by nature, seek reassurance. We draw energy from nature, seek reassurance. We draw energy from agreement, confidence, from recognition, motivation, from shared enthusiasm. But purpose does not always attract immediate company. Some roads must be walked in solitude before they are understood by others. Some convictions must be held without external reinforcement. Some seasons demand that you rely not on applause, but on inner certainty. That is where many falter, not because they lack ability, but because isolation breeds doubt. The absence of encouragement begins to feel like evidence against progress. The lack of recognition begins to feel like proof of insignificance. The quiet surroundings begin to distort perception, making persistence feel irrational rather than courageous. Yet the value of a path is not determined by the number of companions. History has shown repeatedly that new directions, unconventional visions, and meaningful pursuits often begin in solitude. The crowd turns together after results become visible, after success becomes undeniable, after risk transforms into admiration. But before that transforms into doubt. In your house, it is why continue if no one believes? Why persist if no one understands? Why endure if no one acknowledges? These questions are emotionally powerful because they strike at a deeply human need, the desire to be seen, supported, affirmed. The most trouble in your house, your progress cannot be made dependent on constant external reassurance because external reassurance is unpredictable, inconsistent, conditional. Conditional must learn to stand independently. Walking alone demands that you cultivate internal validation. That walking alone demands that you cultivate independent. Walking alone demands that you cultivate independent. That should be your house. It is that you anchor your persistence not in immediate recognition, but in clarity of purpose. That you understand a profound truth. The absence of applause does not invalidate the journey. Silence is not rejection. But lack of recognition is not lack of progress. Often it is simply the natural state of early effort, unseen growth, and quiet preparation. Many of the most transformative phases of any pursuit occur beyond the visibility of others. Foundations are built without spectators. Foundations are built without spectators. The skills are refined without praise. Discipline is forged without abrasion. And these invisible phases are not setbacks, they are prerequisites. Walking alone also reveals something invaluable: the strength of your own belief. The strength of your own belief in your house. It is the when no external energy sustains you, when no collective enthusiasm carries you, you discover whether your commitment is genuine or conditional, whether your direction is deeply chosen or casually preferred. Hey, solitude clarifies loyalty to purpose. It separates desire from dependency. It forces a powerful question: will you continue without applause? Because if your movement requires constant validation, your resilience will always remain fragile. But if your commitment is anchored internally, external fluctuations lose much of their power. Now, pause and reflect honestly. Have you ever slowed your progress because support was absent? Have you ever questioned your direction because recognition was delayed? With mistaken silence for a signal to stop. These experiences are more common than most admit. Yet awareness transforms them. The moment you recognize that loneliness is not an indicator of error, its emotional grip weakens. The moment you understand that solitude can coexist with progress, persistence regains stability, and something else becomes possible. Self-trust, the quiet, grounded confidence that your path does not require universal approval to remain valid. That your efforts retain meaning even when unseen, that your direction remains worthy, even when walked alone. If these words resonate with your experience, do not let them pass as mere reflection. Consider the areas of your life where external validation has influence, internal commitment, where silence has weakened momentum, where silence has distorted perception. Then reframe the experience. There is a remarkable shift that occurs when a person becomes fully aligned. It is subtle, at first almost imperceptible, yet profoundly transformative. Friction begins to fade. Confusion loses its intensity. Effort feels different, not necessarily easier, but clearer, more directed, more purposeful. The alignment is a powerful state. Happens when your thoughts, your decisions, and your actions begin moving in the same direction. When what you say you want and what you actually do are no longer in conflict. When your daily behaviors reinforce your long-term intentions rather than contradict them, because misalignment is exhausting. Saying you value growth while avoiding challenge. But dizzying but tired while resisting discipline, wanting change while clinging to comfort. These internal contradictions generate tension, drain energy, and create a persistent sense of stagnation that many struggle to explain. This to say, often it is inconsistency between intention and action. Alignment removes this invisible resistance. It creates coherence within your own life. Instead of fighting yourself, you begin supporting yourself. Instead of moving in opposing directions, your mental and behavioral energies combine into a single focused force. Consider the difference. When your mind is committed but your habits are careless, progress feels unstable. When your goals are ambitious, but your actions are inconsistent, frustration grows. That when your vision is clear, but your daily choices ignore, momentum collapses under the weight of contradiction. But when alignment emerges, something changes. Decisions simplify, energy concentrates, progress stabilizes. This is not mystical, it is structural. Human behavior is profoundly shaped by patterns. When your patterns support your direction, advancement becomes more natural. when your routines reflect your priorities. Discipline requires less internal negotiation. Me about trouble in your house. It is to be when your actions consistently reinforce your objectives, confidence, the strengthens through evidence rather than imagination. Alignment builds trust with yourself. Each time your behavior matches your intention, self-belief deepens. Each time your choices reflect your values, internal conflict diminishes. Each time your actions validate your commitments, doubt loses ground, and yet alignment demands honesty. It requires confronting uncomfortable questions, not about grand dreams, but about ordinary behaviors, how you spend your time, where your attention flows, which habits dominate your days. Because alignment is not determined by what you declare, it is revealed by what you repeatedly do. Stated priorities are meaningless without behavioral proof. You cannot claim focus while feeding distraction. You cannot claim discipline while indulging in consistency. Alignment is forged through congruence, the steady matching of inner intention with outer action. And this congruence rarely appears suddenly. It is built through awareness, through adjustment, through the willingness to correct small but influential deviations. Now reflect carefully. Where in your life do contradictions exist? Where do your stated goals and daily behaviors diverge? Where does intention say one thing while habit says another? Shabate. These questions are not accusations. They are instruments of clarity because misalignment often persists unnoticed. People attribute frustration to external barriers where the true source may be internal inconsistency. Energy leaks through contradiction. Momentum weakens through conflict. Progress stalls through misalignment. But the moment alignment begins, the moment your actions start reinforcing rather than resisting your direction, change accelerates not because obstacles vanish, but because your internal structure strengthens. Effort because your internal structure strengthens. Effort because your internal structure strengthens. Effort because more efficient focus becomes. It's more durable. Persistence becomes more natural. Alignment is not about perfection. It is about coherence. It is about reducing the gap between who you intend to be and how you consistently behave. It is about transforming values into routines, priorities, into patterns, commitments, into repeated actions, and this process is always available. Right now, not through dramatic reinvention, but through deliberate adjustment, small corrections, subtle shifts, repeated choices that gradually eliminate contradiction and build internal unity. If this resonates, pause for a moment and examine your current trajectory, not your distant ambitions, but your immediate patterns. Identify one area where misalignment persists. One habit, one routine, one recurring decision that conflicts with your declared direction. Victory has a peculiar nature. Many imagine it as a single dramatic moment, a breakthrough, an arrival, a triumphant instant where everything changes at once. But more often than not, victory is far less theatrical and far more deliberate. It is not born in sudden explosions of success, but in the quiet endurance of staying the course. Because the real battle is rarely the obstacle itself. It is the temptation to stop, the urge to deviate, the subtle pull toward ease, distraction, delay. Long before results appear, long before recognition arrives, long before progress becomes visible to anyone else, there comes a period where effort feels repetitive, where growth feels slow, where the destination feels distant. And that is where most people surrender. In your house, it is not at the beginning when enthusiasm is high, not at the end when rewards are near, but in the long, uneventful middle where persistence feels thankless and discipline feels heavy, when nothing seems to change fast enough to justify the struggle. Very phase is where victory is quietly decided. Yet this very phase is quietly decided. Staying the course is not glamorous. It does not provide constant excitement. It does not deliver immediate gratification. It demands patience when impatience feels natural. It demands consistency when inconsistency feels harmful. It demands faith in progress when progress feels invisible. But time has an extraordinary way of separating those who remain from those who retreat. Every day someone abandons a path. Every day, someone decides the effort is too slow, the resistance too great, the uncertainty too uncomfortable, and each departure thins the field. Each surrender reduces competition. Each withdrawal increases the relative advantage of those who simply continue. The endurance is an eliminator. Persistence is a filter. Consistency is a differentiator. What looks like exceptional success from the outside is often the result of exceptional continuity. The willingness to keep moving when stopping would have been easier. The discipline to keep acting when results were not yet visible. The resolve to maintain direction when doubt suggested alternatives. Staying the course compounds power. On your house, it is the small efforts repeated accumulate into significant progress. Minor improvements sustained become undeniable transformation. What seems insignificant a single day becomes extraordinary across months and years. Growth does not always announce itself loudly. It often reveals itself gradually through accumulation rather than spectacle. But accumulation requires duration. Duration requires commitment. Commitment requires clarity. You must understand why you continue, especially when continuation feels difficult. You must remember what you are building, particularly when results appear delayed. Because without clarity of purpose, the monotony of persistence can begin to feel like futility rather than investment. Yet those who stay long enough witness something remarkable. Persistence weakens skills, sharpened, momentum builds. What once felt difficult becomes habitual. What once felt difficult becomes manageable. What once felt slow begins accelerating under the weight of sustained effort. So the very struggle that discouraged you becomes a mechanism that strengthens you. This is the quiet mathematics of perseverance. The effort multiplied by time produces outcomes that isolated bursts of intensity never could. Consistency transforms ordinary actions into extraordinary results. Staying the course turns potential into reality, not through brilliance, but through durability. Not pause for a moment, not casually, but the Balaam reputes it of you abandoned prematurely. Now pause for a moment, not casually. Trouble in your house. It is the how many directions have you left before momentum had time to build? How many possibilities dissolved, not because they were impossible, but because patience expired. These questions are not meant to provoke regret, but awareness, because recognition of this pattern holds immense power. The moment you understand that victory often belongs to those who simply refuse to depart, your relationship with difficulty begins to change. Challenges become tests of endurance rather than signals of defeat. The deed delays become conditions of growth rather than evidence of failure. Repetition becomes investment rather than the failure. Repetition becomes investment rather than frustration. Staying the course is not passive waiting. It is active persistence. It is deliberate continuation. It is a quiet, unwavering commitment to remain aligned with your direction long enough for effort to compound into transformation. If these words resonate with your own journey, let them not remain abstract. Consider your current path, the goals you pursue, the direction you claim as meaningful. Ask yourself a question that demands courage and clarity. Will you remain when enthusiasm fades? Will you persist when progress feels slow? Will you continue? The new when quitting feels reasonable, because victory rarely belongs to the most talented or the most inspired. It belongs to those who stay.